Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to For Collectors. For Collectors, my name is Sammy Thunder, and tonight I am going to discuss with you some of the things that I do at card shows that work for me. What I'm going to suggest to you or mention to you are things that exclusively work for me and may not work for everybody. So I'd say if you're looking for tips or advice, you know, take it with a grain of salt because my advice is not meant to influence your actions or at shows, but simply just to kind of provide some insight for things that I've seen and done at shows that seem to help. So, um, the one thing I will say is there are a different variety of shows. Obviously, there are the big ones like the National, the Philly show for me, the Jim Ryan shows at the County Center in White Plains, New York. Those are the ones that have more than 200 tables, 300 tables. And so there's those levels of shows, the National obviously being the largest, the Philly show being pretty big. So then you have those type of shows. And then you also have some of the regional shows, the ones that are about 100 tables, a little bit more like the Garfield, New Jersey show that I tend to go to every other week, set up at. So there are those kind of shows that have about 100 tables. And then you have the small local shows, which are about 20 to 40 tables. And so there's different approaches in every way. So I'll give you some of my insight as far as some of the things that I've seen from each of those shows. Let's start with the really big ones because I think those are the ones that people seem to gravitate to the most, especially those that can't get to shows but like to watch the videos that I make, that others make, that kind of showcase the variety. And that's the key thing about the big ones is that you have a lot of variety. Let's say, for instance, you're looking for a 55 Clemente rookie card to add to your collection. Well, the nice thing about those massive shows that are 400 tables deep, if not larger, like the National, is that you're probably going to find that majority of the vintage dealers there probably have one. So if that was me, if I were looking for a 55 Clemente, which I did, which I was looking for at the last year's National, there's absolutely no reason why I need to rush into finding one right off the bat because the competition to find them, while yes, there are a lot of people who would love to get a really nice condition one in a low price, the nice thing is that every dealer has one or has something that you might be interested in. So you don't need to go to the first table and buy the very first one that you see, unless by chance that one just hits the right spots, hits all of your check marks, whatever you're looking for. So let's say, for instance, the National, being that that is a massive, endless show of vintage dealers, you have time. I think you can walk around and safely kind of find the card that you find the version of the 55 Clemente that you want. Whether it's, for me, for example, I'll use my scenario. Let me take it out for you. Give you an idea. Okay. So, this is the one that I bought last year. And I bought it raw because it had such good color to it. And with the unfortunate circumstance that somebody wrote on his forehead, but that's beside the point. In my situation, I spent the first day walking around, just getting a feel for everything. I knew that this Clemente, there would be many, many, many tables that had this. And so I spent the day kind of scouting, the first day of the National, scouting around, looking to see what tables were selling the Clemente and how much and blah, blah, blah. And then day two came, and I knew that was going to be my day to buy whatever card I wanted. And the Clemente was definitely on there. And I found the table that I wanted to buy from. He still had the card. He had it raw, like I mentioned, and I bought it off of him for a very nice deal. and I ended up sending to SGC for instant grading that day. Came back a 1, but I was okay with that because I knew I was going to get that grade. So, ultimately, for a card like that, it makes sense to take your time. For me, it worked because I scouted as many vintage tables, and I was able to find the right dealer for the right price, find the right dealer at the right price, and it worked out. So that's a good example of a card that you'll commonly find without really having too many problems. Now, let's say, for instance, I've showed this card repeatedly, so there's really no reason to go too far into it. But let's say now the Philly show. The Philly show is smaller than the National, but it's still a pretty massive show. And I got this next card at the Philly show. Now, let's hypothetically say I'm going to show you the card. It's the 1958 Hires Root Beer Willie Mays test. I'm sorry it's coming up blurry. The camera, I'm still trying to get these adjustments made on the camera, so I'm going to kind of go back a little bit and showcase it that way. Hopefully, if I can get this, there we go. So the Hires Root Beer test, a very tough card to find, even with the tab removed on the bottom. So this card in particular, now if you find this at a table and you're looking for something that's unusual, something you don't see every day, something that pops up every now and then, but not too often, it might make sense to dedicate a little bit more time at the show on the table that has it. Because I can tell you from my experience, when I saw this card, it was the only card. This was the only card at the Philly show. No, and other dealers might have had it, but they were not selling it. My experience was the one dealer who had this card. I spent a considerable amount of time looking up information on it, trying to find comp prices over the years. Obviously, this card does not get sold a lot because there's not that many out there to find comps for. They exist, don't get me wrong, but comparatively to, say, his 55 or 56 tops card or 57 and so forth, there are significantly more sales of those cards. So I knew the opportunity would be very slim to find another one, and I haven't found another 58 Hires Root Beer card at a show. Probably online. They might exist online, but definitely not at a show. Point I'm getting at is a card like this, something that you don't see too often, and you want something like that in your collection, dedicate the time and work out a deal with the dealer if you really want it. Obviously, you want to see the back. This is what the back looks like. Very special looking card. And there's a chance, this is from my experience, you might have to pay up for it. But I've learned this from Orlando. I've learned this from Mangini. I've learned this from some of the key guys in the hobby. Is when you find something that you like, that you don't see too often, and this comes from experience of going to a lot of shows, dedicate the time and make it work. Find out how much, like, think about how much you would want to pay for it. How much does it mean to you? So for this, I paid probably a little bit more than I should have, but I have it. It's in my possession. It's in my collection, and I'm proud to have this card. So that is my experience when it comes the contrast between finding a more frequently seen card like a 55 Clemente rookie versus, say, the 1958 Hires Root Beer Willie Mays card. It's just an example. And that's looking at some of the bigger shows. When you get to some of the smaller ones, your options obviously slim down considerably because I'm going to use the Fishkill show. That's my buddy Mike's show. He promotes it. Does a great job, by the way. Brings in a lot of great traffic. I set up there every single month. But he'll say that it's a smaller show, but it's a great one. That being said, if you're adding to your collection, and you don't get to shows too often and you only have access to those local shows, the chance, and obviously there's online sales. So you start to consider, okay, that same 55 Clemente, there's a dealer at this local show that has one. I don't have access to those big shows like the Philly show or the National, and I'm not going to go to that. Or, you know, hypothetically, if you're not going to that and you have access to your local show, your whole mindset changes. Obviously, not every table at that local show is going to have a 55 Clemente. That one dealer that you see every month, the vintage guy, has the 55 Clemente. The competition lowers because not as much foot traffic is coming in, and let's say that dealer only does local shows. So then you start to consider, all right, he's asking X, Y, and Z for that. I start looking online to see if I can get it maybe a little less expensive online, but you have to factor in that you're seeing the card in person, it's hitting the right spots, hitting all the check marks, and that way you'll dedicate more time, a little more patience, with that one dealer instead of going table to table like you would at a bigger show. So there's that. Um, Smaller shows, less competition, but less supply for those sort of cards. And I will say this much: if you find something very special and unique, like I don't know if I have anything I got from a smaller show, but I'll use the Tom Seaver as an example. I will say this much: the Tom Seaver transogram that I picked up came from one of the bigger shows at the county center, one of the Jim Ryan shows. And I picked this up last time. I got this I mean, this was the first table I went to, and I've been wanting one of these. And these don't come up too often. Not to say they're exceedingly rare, but you don't see these at shows. At least I haven't. I didn't see this at a Philly show. I didn't see this at the county center show outside of the one that I bought. So if you find something like this at your local show and you want to add something unique, dedicate the time to do it, because very likely you will get a better deal probably at that local show than maybe you'll get it at the bigger show. It depends. That sort of situation is all circumstantial. So it might happen, it might not happen. But if you have the opportunity, definitely do so at a local show because they don't come up too often at local shows. And yeah, I think it's definitely worth jumping on those opportunities. So yeah, and then talking about, let me put this back. Talking about the Garfield show is my experience. I set up there. Garfield is great because you kind of get the little bit of both that big field show and that local show at the same time. I would say that most of the time, my experience at the Garfield show is majority of it is the more traditional, commonly found stuff. But every now and then, there are dealers that will come through the Garfield show that have the very special stuff, like the Venezuelan or the Venezuelan cards, the transograms, stuff like that. I guess you can call them oddball. I like to call them unique. So, or like the Journal American Maze that I have, stuff like that might come up. And so, when that happens, for me personally, I like to dedicate my time around those dealers like Brian Fish, who has the Venezuelans. I was tempted by the 68 Tom Seaver Venezuelan that he had. And he also had some really nice, like he had a 68 Nolan Ryan Venezuelan autographed, which is apparently there's only two of them that are out there. So in those circumstances, I like to generally take my time and walk the show, look at the table, see if anything hits me. And from there, I'm able to kind of rationalize and make a decision. Those shows, the 100+ tables, chances are you'll see the same card that you're after. If it's like a 56 Koufax or 55 Koufax Clemente, any of those big star players, their rookie cards or something. Those shows, similarly to the big ones like the National, you'll probably find it at least in 2 or 3 vintage tables. In that sense, you're limited, so you have to kind of make a quicker decision than you would at the National, for example. But you can weigh your options. Local shows, you're limited, but less competition because there's not as much foot traffic. Garfield, you're dealing with a little bit more competition because there's more foot traffic and more people will want that card. And then the National, it's sort of in a linear way. You have more competition, but there's more supply, so it's all linear. As you know, as the number of people increase in terms of foot traffic, the dealers' number should increase as well with the people that have that sort of card. So it's all you're kind of given that sort of response. So the last thing I will say, and I hope this kind of I hope this kind of helps, but with more time, if you do have access to shows, if you do go to the National, I think it's important to establish relationships with a lot of these dealers that you see pretty often. I'm fortunate enough to go to the Philly show, go to the County Center show, and see dealers like Stan's Vintage. Um, what is it, Craig? I think his name is Craig. He runs his own table, and Howard Chasser. These guys I see all the time. Harry Kolb, and so forth. I get to know these guys a little bit. I get to know what they have in their inventory. They get to know what I'm looking for, and you start kind of establishing a relationship with these guys. Woody Durward as well at the Philly show, and at all different types of dealers, and you really start to kind of understand what they have and what they can help you with, and it really goes a long way because you start buying stuff from each of these dealers and you start building your collection that way. So again, hope this was helpful. I really didn't. I was not going off a script with this. I was kind of going off just off the top of my head. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Again, subscribe if you're new to the For Collectors channel. We're getting close to 1,000, which is really great, and we look forward to doing something special for that. So keep us getting to 1,000, and we'll see you on Sunday. Take care.